Okay, everybody, I want to recommend a very underseen and underappreciated movie for you. And this is close to Halloween when this is going up. This could work for a Halloween movie. Doesn't necessarily mean that it is a Halloween movie, but it does have some horrifying aspects to it. I'm talking today about Samuel Fuller's 1982 thriller, White Dog. This is a movie that is about a dog that is trained to attack black people. And that's all that it does. And this is roughly based on a true story. I think it took place back in the 50s, back when this was more of a common practice in certain parts of the country. The movie itself has been moved to what at the time was modern day, 1982. And the rough outline of the plot is Christy McNichol. She is an actress living in Hollywood. She accidentally hits a dog with her car. The dog is not overly hurt. She nurses it back to health. She grows attached to this dog. And then, come to find out, and I won't ruin hardly any of this movie because hardly anybody's seen it, and I want you to get a chance to experience it yourself, that this dog, she finds out this dog is trained to attack only black people. So, and initially her first thoughts is maybe she's going to have the dog put down, but in an act of desperation, she takes the dog to an animal trainer. And this animal trainer is played by Paul Winfield. His name is Keys in the movie. And he's a black man who, before this has happened, has attempted to untrain these white dogs. And this is just another shot that he takes at seeing if he can take a dog that's been trained to hate a certain group and untrain it. And that's basically the idea of the movie. It's not an overcomplicated film. It is a thriller, but it's a complicated thriller. It is a thinking person's thriller. Because it's not a fun movie. This is not a movie where you're like, you know, the slasher is getting people and you're like, ooh, get the teenage. That never happens here. There's never an instance where you're on the dog's side. But there are a lot of interesting complications that happen with this because it's not really the dog's fault. The dog is only doing what it was trained to do. And yet, if you leave the dog out, you don't do anything with it, that's irresponsible. I mean, that's murder in a way because this dog will attack and kill black people. So the question is, can this be trained out of the dog? Who's responsible ultimately for racism and for it continuing in future generations? And do we just give up on somebody who has these attitudes, especially if they've gotten this bad? Or do we work and it's fascinating, all the questions that come from this movie. You get the idea. Paul Winfield is wonderful in the film as the trainer. He's always been a very sensitive actor. I saw him in Star Trek. He was in Next Generation, and he was in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. He also was in Sounder. He played Martin Luther King in a television film. He's an actor who brought enormous soul to everything that he did, and it is really on display here as he has determination. He will not give up on his mission to prove that this animal can be cured of its racist attitudes and its racist training. And you sense that there's just a desperation to believe that this dog, and by extension, people, can change. Now, again, I will not ruin the ending because it's a very underseen movie. In fact, when this movie was made, it was controversial enough that the NAACP fought, I believe it was Paramount Pictures, and said, look, they hadn't seen the film, but they didn't like the idea of it. And they fought the studio on it. And the studio, because it wasn't a big movie for them, just decided to fold. And the movie never got a theatrical release. I think it showed it showed for like a week in Detroit or something, and in Europe, and it was on cable a couple of times, but for years, you could not see this movie. And then in 2008, the Criterion Collection put a DVD out, and there has been a Blu-ray in England. So you can get a disc of this. I believe it's also on the Vudu streaming service, but I think that's the only streaming service it's on. It's hard to find, but I really do think it's worth seeking out. This is a conversation starter. If you don't have things to talk about when this movie is over, there's no hope for you ever talking about a movie because people will take wildly different things from the places this movie decides to go and the ideas that it presents. Like all great movies, it asks questions. I don't think that it has a ton of answers, but it does ask questions. It's worth seeking out. If it doesn't sound at all like your thing, then it probably isn't. But if you do like movies that bring up topics that you want to talk about, and they bring up controversial even, or you know, topics that sometimes can be difficult to discuss, this is the movie for you. Like, if you don't shy away from those things, I recommend White Dog if you can find it. So there you go. That's my quasi Halloween movie recommendation. I just think it needs more attention, this movie, and I really think it's worth seeking it out. If you have seen it, let me know what you thought of it in the comments. And yeah, we'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.